Hi, I'm Associate Professor Caroline Ellison from Justice and Society. I'm the Crossing the Horizon Professor of Ageing and Disability for the Bachelor and Program Director for Bachelor of Social Science, Ageing and Disability. And this is part 2 of a discussion with Helen Neale, who's the project lead for a DSS ILC grant around micro-enterprise project with Community Living Project. So welcome back, Helen.
Thanks, Caroline.
So this time we're going to talk more about Community Living Project and their history with micro-enterprise and the processes that they use to create or facilitate and assist somebody. But also if we could talk a little bit about the language that CLP uses around personal assistants who assist people with their enterprises.
So the micro-enterprise project actually started 12 years ago, 2012, Jane Barrett was given the task of coming up with something that what was happening at the time, there was very few options, suitable options for people who wanted more than day option programs. So people with significant disability were really given the choice of day options or nothing. And for a lot of people, they weren't suitable for those options anyway due to their health or their disability issues. So she was tasked with trying 6 months to come up with a program, a framework rather, where there would be some meaningful work for people with disability. And that was the start of the micro-enterprise project. So since then it's been independently evaluated, it's been tried and tested, and about 140 people through that time have actually been assisted to start and maintain their own micro-enterprise. So it's very exciting. People of all ages, all sorts of disability, male and female or other, and every enterprise is different because every person is different. So it's a very unique process where the business, the small business, the product or service is crafted around the person and their interests, their skills, their talents and their resources.
And that's really important because I know on the Community Living Project website, there's a video of David Oakey. Yeah. And I know for David, I have a coffee table that was restored by David.
Lucky.
Yeah, lots of people actually, have asked me if they could buy my coffee table. I go, no, it's very definitely mine. But it's that if you listen to that video, David very much wanted vocation. So after a catastrophic accident, he'd been working previously with wood and with woodwork. He couldn't return to that specific job, and he didn't want to do day options. He very much wanted to work. So that's a video absolutely worth checking out on the CLP website if you want more information. But can you give us other examples of individuals that either were rejected from the usual pathways to employment, or for whom it just wasn't their thing?
And as I said, really a big part of the project and my role is to get out and share information to inspire others to think beyond the traditional pathways of what life might look like for a person with disability. So that there's more than day options, more than supported employment, and a micro-enterprise. It's so different for everybody. So one example I'm thinking of straight away, not someone so much that was in a day options program, but was in supported employment, so in the old language, a sheltered workshop, and a young woman in her late 20s, lots to offer, but had gone into this pathway and was so bored. That boredom was really playing out on a daily basis, so she was reluctant to get out of bed to go to work. She was really quite unengaged or disengaged with life in lots of ways. And her mother came along to an information session and heard about micro-enterprise, and that was 2 years ago. And now this woman has her own micro-enterprise. She's working 2 to 3 days a week in that, and her whole outlook on life has changed. So she has huge change in her confidence, the way she connects with people. She has an enormous amount of pride in her product. She's built new relationships, which I think is really important because she's seen in her local community as a provider of a service as well as a consumer because she's buying her products as well. So she's really connected to people, and it's made an enormous difference to this person, but also her family, who suddenly have someone who's happy and has a really meaningful life. So she was bored. There wasn't a lot of purpose, and that's what we see with people when the right microenterprise is discovered for the person, then their life can change.
Well, absolutely. And we often talk about people who have behaviours of concern or challenging behaviours. And when we look at the function of those behaviours, what do they serve for someone? In the case of that young woman, if there had been behaviours, the boredom is the key.
Yeah, absolutely.
People don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, let me go and, hit someone or not get out of bed or be difficult. It's the environment that's creating that. And so if day options is not right, if having nothing to do, free time is in itself not of any value if you have too much of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we all might say, oh, gee, I wish I had a bit more free time. Well, that's fine if you have a lot of other things in your life. But if there is nothing in your life, then...
Well, that's what we found, and it was no surprise. But the more we looked into what people were doing, most people's lives were just full of time-filling activities. So things to do, and they were often really dragged out. There was often a lot of group sort of activities too. So half of the day might be spent just driving around picking up other people. So this, getting out, having just no real purpose. And when you see people in that group setting going out together, that's a natural barrier to other people coming in. So it's a bit like, they're being looked after, we can't go into that space. So just the very nature of grouping people together, congregating people to do those time-filling activities is really so detrimental to the person's well-being.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a really interesting space. I remember going back to Jacques Pellier, him saying that one of the things for him was looking at a community as well as the person to go, what's missing from this community? So what is it this community needs? So not replicating, another coffee shop if there are 15, but if there's something missing in a community, that sometimes if that suits a person, you can create a micro enterprise. It's often seen by the community as, wow, that person's filling a gap that the community needs. Yeah,
certainly customised employment does that in other ways as well, with sort of job carving and other things. But with microenterprise, it's very important that it is about the person's strengths and interests, and then building on that. So slowly too, taking a small start and really intentionally thinking through all the different steps and processes.
So who supports who supports a person with a micro enterprise?
Well, there are very different ways that it can be done, and we know that families have been doing this forever.
Yeah.
So often, a family might have their own business and they decide that that could be a good thing for their son or daughter to move into and build them into that. We know that, there's some really strong advocates out there in the family space helping their son or daughter have their own business as well. But if someone hasn't got that, or the family doesn't want to take on that role, in our case with CLP, there is actually the Microenterprise Project, where a consultant actually does a really big job. It's done so well that it never actually shines the light on the consultant, but the consultant is heavily involved from start and all the way through. So they will work with the person and their key loved one to go through this process of discovery to work out what could be a possible enterprise. And then once that's decided, if it looks like this is going to be the right way to go forwards, then they will actually invite other people in to build a small enterprise management group, and that's using social capital. So inviting people in to say, well, it's almost like a small business committee. People that could assist the person to run a small business.
And they're not necessarily people that have worked in the disability sector.
Absolutely
they're often
not.
business people and people in the local community that may take an interest, and that's really important. And I know also in the case that I actually have a young man who mows my lawn, and I do so appreciate that that micro enterprise. And it's really interesting because I have two housemates that I share with, and what you were saying is if I'd got another enterprise that perhaps was a small group of people with a disability going around doing lawns, they wouldn't necessarily interact with my housemates the way that the young man that mows my lawn does.
Absolutely.
So I think that you're right. It creates that. So when people move in with me, I let them know that I have this young man that comes and mows my lawn, and they've observed that the person that assists him takes, how that individual's stepping back and asking him questions like how short should we cut the lawn today, and so it seems like that assistant is actually someone who has some understanding of horticulture or mowing lawns rather than a disability support worker.
Well, that's the third part. So we have the consultant. This is under the MEP process. The consultant, the enterprise management group, and then every person with their enterprise has a PA or personal assistant, and that person is recruited for the skills of the job. So, for example, if someone was going to have a floristry business, we would encourage them and assist them to recruit someone with floristry skills. Because if you ask me, if I was, going to go and do that, I don't know the difference between a flower that lasts a week or a flower that lasts a day. So what we would say is if we're going to have a high quality product or service, which is what the intention is, then someone needs to be recruited for the skills of the job, and then the consultant would work and the family with the PA to help them learn about the person. So that it's a really skillful job, and it's done exactly the way you've highlighted, so that the person with the enterprise is the owner and is always front and centre.
I think that's what stands MEP and CLP apart from other options, is that it's not, support workers are fabulous, but they have a different role. In this case, you're right, we're wanting someone with that expertise. So whether it's growing things, mowing lawns, it could be painting houses, where you wouldn't want me as a support worker if you need to paint a house, but you want a painter.
Well, I think that's so important, because if we don't assist the person to really have that high quality product, then there's a real level of tokenism that will come in. This is not charity. This is not someone feeling sorry for someone. In fact, all the enterprises that I know of, they don't in any way show that they even have a disability, because it's not actually important at all. So it's about the product and the service, always keeping it high quality.
And I'll just share one more story before we end this video, is that I recently went to a coffee shop, the Cellar Door, we'll give them a plug, at Brighton. And I purchased a couple of bags of dried fruit made by Jocelyn. And I went to the front and I bought the last 4 packets, because it can be difficult to get. And the gentleman behind the counter said, "Oh, isn't that a great product?" And I said, and he had no idea that,
your connection.
My connection. And I said, "Yes, it's an absolutely fabulous product, and I'm really sorry I've bought your last 4 bags. And he goes, "Oh, that's okay." He said, "The young woman who makes them will be in next week, and I'll make sure I get an extra box." And he said, "It's such a great product that, people buy them for their children to have." And he not once mentioned that Jocelyn had a disability. He talked about her and her contribution and how great her product was. And it wasn't till I tapped my card that I then said to him, I gave him some positive feedback and said, "I really appreciate that, because I actually know Jocelyn." And I know the circumstances under which she's established her business. And, he sort of blushed, and I went, "No, you actually presented." And so obviously he's made a connection and built a connection with her, not with her disability.
And that's a big part of the process as well, is making sure that customers are local and that there's a regular relationship. So it's building up a relationship. It's also building up a level of safeguarding, which I think is so important as well. If Jocelyn stopped turning up, or if she started turning up looking really dishevelled or lost weight, I expect that customer would actually contact someone to say what's going on or where is she. So and this is all part of the thinking and the framework that Jane Barrett designed.
He was quite proud that he stocked her product, and the cafe was full. So lots of other people could actually hear the conversation that was going on, and not once did I disclose that Jocelyn had a disability, and nor did he, but it was really interesting.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, look, thank you for sharing. If anyone's interested in Micro Enterprise Project, learning more about what CLP does, then Jane Barrett, Helen and the team of Micro Enterprise at Community Living Project would be more than happy. They also run information centres, so you can keep an eye out on the website for those. So thanks again, Helen.
Pleasure, Caroline. Thank you.